Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you're interested in and really pull out the essential knowledge for you. We try to make it quick, insightful, and maybe add a few surprising bits too.
Exactly. The goal isn't to drown you in information, but to help you make sense of things efficiently.
And this time, we're tackling a really interesting topic that you, the learner, brought up. We know you want to grasp things quickly, get those aha moments, but, without getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah, the core question here is about artificial intelligence.
hmm
Could AI actually help solve cold case investigations? It's a pretty compelling idea.
Definitely. And you gave us some great material to work with. There's this really active Reddit thread discussing exactly
All
that.
right.
Then some notes from Morton solicitors about AI in policing generally.
Hmm.
And finally, this quite detailed guide from the National Institute of Justice, the NIJ, on best practices for cold case units.
So our mission today is to, well, dive into all that. We want to see what the real potential for AI is in these cases, but also what are the hurdles, the limitations.
Based on what these sources say.
Exactly. We'll pull out the key insights so you get a balanced view.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting with that Reddit thread. It kicked off with a user, Color Fuel, asking about AI solving cases like the Jennifer Kessie disappearance.
Right. They specifically wondered if AI could sort of fill in the gaps, especially with that famously blurry surveillance photo.
And the reaction was, well, pretty immediate, wasn't it? A lot of skepticism right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely. People jumped in saying, AI isn't some kind of magic wand that was a belladonna tropa,
Yeah, and Pinko Perchik joked a psychic might be just as good.
which, kind of speaks to that public perception, doesn't it? That AI is this almost mystical thing.
But then you had routine famous 4267 make a really practical point about the Kessie case specifically.
Yeah, they pointed out that the image quality itself was just so poor, like consistently blocked by fence post.
So AI wouldn't have much useful information to actually work with.
Exactly. That's a fundamental issue, right? AI needs decent data. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
True. It was good though. Color Fuel later edited their post, acknowledging they were still learning on AI, appreciated the respectful replies.
Yeah, that's always good to see in online discussions. It keeps things constructive.
So, okay, beyond the skepticism, did the thread offer any concrete ideas for how AI might actually be used, even with warnings?
It did. There were a few interesting suggestions. Long English snakes mentioned things like AI sharpening old photos or maybe generating 3D skull models.
Things that are kind of already happening in some ways.
Sort of, yeah. They drew a parallel to AI in Google Maps routing using pattern recognition on data. Image enhancement uses similar ideas, like training AI on lots of images to learn how to fill in missing details plausibly.
Okay. And Color Fuel themselves had another idea, a bit more complex.
Yeah, about using AI to search, like, paywalled newspaper archives, places like newspapers.com.
To find old leads, maybe missed in missing persons cases, ones not in the official NEMIS database.
Exactly. Trying to bridge those information gaps, because, sometimes vital clues are just stuck in these separate silos. Manual searching is just impossible at that scale.
That sounds potentially useful, but it also triggered a big warning sign for some users, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. Ruby Carlisle jumped in with a major concern. AI just making things up.
Fabricating information.
Yeah, they gave an example of ChatGPT apparently inventing fake Washington Post articles. That's a serious problem if you're talking about legal investigations.
Hugely serious. You'd need intense human verification for anything an AI suggested there.
Absolutely critical. You can't just take its output as fact.
Okay, what else? There was an idea about matching photos.
Right. Duffy 171 suggested AI could search databases and maybe social media, looking for matches between unidentified people and photos out there.
That feels a bit more grounded in current tech, like facial recognition, although that has its own issues.
It does, but yeah, comparing images across large data sets is something AI is used for. It could
Okay.
speed up identifications potentially.
But then you get the counter arguments again. Sushi Screams worried about AI creating false leads, just adding noise.
Yeah, muddying the waters, I think they said.
And Annie Pula brought up the data AI learns from and potential biases baked into that data, also ethical concerns.
Crucial points. The AI is only as good and as unbiased as the data it's trained on, and the ethical implications are huge.
Definitely. But okay, probably the most intriguing idea I saw came from Stacy.
Ah, yes, the idea of feeding all the case files into an AI.
Exactly. Interview transcripts, evidence logs, notes, everything. Letting the AI look for patterns, build timelines, maybe check alibis, find inconsistencies.
Now that plays to AI's strengths, processing language, analyzing complex, unstructured data.
Imagine pointing an AI at a decades-old cold case box full of paper and having it flag things humans might have missed over the years.
It could potentially highlight contradictions or subtle connections that are just really hard to spot manually. It could, help investigators focus their efforts.
There was also a more futuristic idea from a deleted user.
Right, the idea of a massive database
Hmm.
combining missing persons info with, like, behavioral profiles maybe scraped from places like Reddit.
That sounds ambitious and maybe a bit scary from a privacy perspective.
Yeah, that one definitely pushes into territory with significant ethical and privacy questions.
Yeah.
Very long term, perhaps.
Okay, so the Reddit thread gives us this real mixed excitement about possibilities, but also some really strong cautionary
A
notes.
perfect setup for looking at the more formal sources.
Right, so Morton solicitors. They acknowledge the growing interest in AI for policing, including cold cases.
hmm But it was quite brief, wasn't it? More of a nod to the trend.
Yeah, not much detail there. Which brings us to the NIJ Guide, the National Institute of Justice.
Exactly. This is the deep dive into best practices from the experts running these cold case units.
And it's comprehensive. Now, it probably predates the really big AI hype we see now, right? So it doesn't mention AI specifically.
Correct. But we can look at the best practices they do recommend and think about where AI could fit in or where those Reddit warnings become really relevant.
Okay, so first up, information management. The NIJ Guide talks a lot about the mess of old files, paper records, disorganized, not digitized.
A huge problem. They mentioned the need for an initial inventory, just figuring out what you even have.
Seems like a prime spot for AI, digitizing and organizing.
Absolutely. You could use AI for optical character recognition, OCR, to turn paper into digital text,
Right.
and then natural language processing, NLP, to help index it, make it searchable. Imagine searching decades of notes instantly for a name or a detail. That's potentially huge.
Okay, what about case review? The NIJ says getting fresh eyes on old cases is vital to avoid, like tunnel vision or bias.
Could AI help there?
Well, maybe as a first pass, like we talked about from the Reddit thread, AI could scan all the files and maybe flag inconsistencies or unexplored leads.
But it couldn't replace the human judgment, right?
No, absolutely not. The AI could highlight things, but an experienced detective needs to interpret them, decide if they're actually meaningful.
That makes sense. It supports the review, doesn't replace it.
And that idea from Stacy Hoko on Reddit about timelines and patterns, that seems to directly support the kind of thorough review the NIJ wants.
Exactly. AI could potentially assemble complex timelines from scattered data points or spot subtle patterns across different witness statements or evidence logs, things very hard for a human to juggle manually.
What about those big databases law enforcement already uses? CODIS for DNA, Nubbin for ballistics, Nemis for missing persons.
Could AI make them work better together, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. AI could help analyze data within those systems, maybe finding weaker links or similarities that don't meet the threshold for an automatic hit, but could still be significant.
Cross-referencing them more effectively, too.
Possibly. Speeding up the process of finding connections between cases based on DNA, bullets, or missing identified people.
Okay, but the NIJ guide, even without mentioning AI,
Yeah.
raises points that echo the Reddit concerns, right? Like verifying evidence.
Definitely. The NIJ is very clear. You need meticulous verification. A forensic hit, like a CODIS match, is a lead, not proof.
Right. It needs corroboration.
Which ties right back to the worry about AI generating bad info. You can't just trust the machine. You have to verify its findings against other evidence.
It underlines that need for human oversight.
And speaking of humans, the NIJ Guide puts a massive emphasis on the human element, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about experienced investigators, working closely with prosecutors, supporting victim families, ethical practices. That's the core.
They recommend multidisciplinary teams, right? Investigators, lawyers, forensic scientists, victim advocates.
Exactly. So AI might be a tool for that team.
A tool, yeah. Not a replacement for their combined expertise, their intuition, their ethical judgment.
No way. The NIJ really stresses understanding the context of a crime, corroborating evidence, things AI just isn't equipped to do on its own.
It comes back to that Reddit comment. AI is only as good as the information you feed it.
And it lacks that human understanding of motive, nuance, context. That's where investigators are irreplaceable.
The NIJ report also paints a pretty stark picture of the scale of the problem, the cold case crisis.
Yeah, the numbers are sobering. Huge numbers of unsolved homicides, clearance rates falling.
Which explains why people are looking hopefully at new tools like AI. There's an urgency there.
There is. The challenge is immense, so exploring new approaches makes sense, but it has to be done carefully, realistically.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up for you, the learner. Based on all these sources, the Reddit discussion, the solicitor's note, the detailed NIJ guide, what's the bottom line on AI and cold cases?
Well, it seems AI definitely holds some potential, especially for wrangling the massive amounts of data involved.
Right, digitizing old files, organizing information, maybe spotting patterns or inconsistencies in huge data sets.
But, and it's a big but, it is absolutely not a magic bullet.
No, the limitations are serious. The risk of inaccurate output, the dependence on good data quality.
And the huge ethical questions around bias, privacy, and just how you use it responsibly in the justice system.
And critically, as the NIJ guide hammers home, the human element is still paramount.
Totally. Experienced detectives, critical thinking, collaboration, victim focus, ethical grounding AI can't replace that,
It might become a powerful assistant to those human experts and teams.
but not take their place. It's about augmenting human capabilities, not replacing human judgment.
So hopefully this deep dive gave you that quick but, fairly thorough overview, some insights into the potential and the pitfalls without getting too bogged down.
Yeah, understanding both sides of the coin here is really important.
And it leaves us with a final thought, really, for you to mull over.
As we generate more and more digital data in every part of our lives.
How do we best navigate this? How can we ethically and effectively combine AI's power with essential human expertise to tackle these unsolved cases in the future?
That's the big question, isn't it? Something to keep thinking about as this technology develops.